Here it is heated in the oven, the selenium comes out and it is carried further. But it is not carried so far that you can collect in the solution. It's not distillation. It comes out and gets deposited somewhere in the tube about 10, 15 centimeters away. And then you have to go with water, dissolve it and take it out. So it's a rather complicated, high class technology, but I think sometimes one has to adopt it if you have no other choice. If you don't have the proton beam, then this was just shown and we could produce a lot of selenium 73 for this purpose. The next diagram shows again the same thing. The upper part is the thermochromatography part. And from here, how is the distribution? If we see in the oven, the lower part, from the target, what comes out? It comes out the gallium. Gallium comes out directly and gets deposited. The selenium is taken and carried further to about 15 centimeter distance. So here is selenium. This is the selenium peak gamma spectrometry. This is the gallium peak. So gallium and selenium can be separated and one goes through water. And this way you can get pure materials. So the summary is that sometimes it's not easy to make a radionuclide, but if it is important and if simple method is not available, then you have to develop high-class targetry. You can do it. Not every laboratory can do it, but some laboratories which can do perform such things. So I'm telling you now what is going on. You see, these are the research type lectures now, the development work. So one tries all methods, maybe 5 or 6 methods of separation, and sometimes one method is considered to be good. Okay, now the whole effort involved in the production of non-standard positron emitters, which means longer-lived positron emitters, is summarized here. Some of the very important radionuclides are listed here. And these are manganese 52, 5.6T, produced at a PN reaction, small cyclotron, the energy range you can see. And where is manganese 52 used? It is used, it's a magnetic material, so one combines it with PET. It's a positron emitter, combines PET with MRI. I will come in the next lecture next week to show some of the new directions in applications going on. And one of them is to combine PET with MRI. So manganese 52 is very much suitable for a combination of PET and MRI. We have another isotope, cobalt 57. It can be done through P alpha reaction or DN reaction. Again, they are low energy reactions, so small baby cyclotron is enough. One can separate it, and what for it is used? It is used for tumor imaging or neuronal calcium marker. You see, these processes, tumor imaging, they are slow biological processes. Tumor formation is a slow process. So if one wants to investigate it, one has to have a bit longer lived isotope, and cobalt 55 to 17 hour is one of them. Copper 64 has become very, very important. This is one of the most important non-standard positron emitters. Again, a low energy PN reaction, and this is used in radioimmunotherapy. You see, the antibodies are labeled and they are put and they can fight some of the tumorous development cells, and so this helps into the radioimmunotherapy. But there you need certain metals which form copper complexes which are going into the tumorous parts of the tissue. Next one is arsenic 72, not so important. Bromine 76, also not so important. Rubidium 82, also not. Used in cardiology, different purposes. Very important is yttrium 86. 14.7 hours. PN reaction again, 14. I've shown you this example of yttrium-86, where it is used in theranostic approach. This we will also learn in the next lecture next week. What is theranostic approach? It means you try to combine diagnostics with therapy. It's called theranostic. So yttrium-86 is used in diagnosis through PET, and yttrium-90 is used for therapy through beta minus. And combination of the two, yttrium-86 and yttrium-89, just one pair, if you put in one patient, it is called personalized medicine. The patient first is investigated through PET, and you can have the distribution of the activity, and then yttrium-90 is given, and you have the therapeutic effect. And dosimetry is done with the help of the data obtained from yttrium-86. Very, very important isotope. Other one is zirconium-89, also very important, PN reaction again. This is used in so-called immunopet. What is immunopet? If antibody is labeled with positron emitters and you do PET, it is called immunopet. Then technetium-94 is there, iodine-120 not so important. Again, iodine-124 is important because it makes very good complexes, and so PN reaction again, small cyclotron, and from this one can make many phytopharmaceuticals. So you see, these are some of the most important radionuclides, positron-emitting radionuclides, which are produced. The darkened ones, copper-64, yttrium-86, and iodine-124, they are very important, and I am proud to say that the methodology of production of these three radionuclides was developed in our laboratory. And now the methodology is used by everybody in the world. The PN reaction for copper-64 production, the PN for yttrium-86 production, and the PN on iodine-124 production. Copper-64 became so important, it did not find much use in Europe. We developed it in 1993. It did not find much use in Europe, but in USA very much. In St. Louis, they took up our method, developed it further, and they could produce so much copper-64, they were supplying the whole of USA and earning so much money that the whole Department of Chemistry was running from the money which they got through the sale of copper-64. So sometimes it is, if we have just one thing interesting, important, and many people are involved and interested, then one can also distribute, do service, and also earn money to it. Very important is also zirconium-89, especially in immunopet, but this isotope was not developed by us. This has been developed by other groups, mostly in England and in USA. But so the development is going on, and further radionuclides are being investigated. Some new methods are being investigated, one is higher energies. So it's a continuous research and development work which is going on. It's not a static field, it's a dynamic field. It's a constant development is going on, and at the moment, almost every laboratory which has a cyclotron, even if it is a laboratory of nuclear physics, they want to show that they can do some applied work, some medically oriented work. I think sometimes it's third-class work, not really useful in medicine. It may be good in physics, but not in medicine. In medicine, you have to have a very careful method of preparation. The purity, I emphasize, the purity is the most important criterion, and that you can have only if we have properly chosen conditions. If you take properly enriched target material, proper energy range, proper chemical separation, proper quality control. These are must. If some physicists measure some cross sections on natural gadolinium and say it is useful for medicine, it may be sometimes useful, but it is not an aimed research. I think here data measurement and development has to have proper aim, and then you can get the most reliable results. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think after shown that we have it has been developed. Almost 25 non-standard positron emitters have been developed, and our laboratory is known for that. We have developed most of the work. One comes now to the evaluation of suitability of new radionuclides for PET. You have developed something. It is pure. It has high specific activity. It has all the qualities. But the question is, can it be useful in imaging? You see, it's new consideration coming now. Purity is there. Enough quantity is there. Decay properties are more or less suitable. Half-life is proper. You have the isotope. The question is, can your tomograph really analyze it? One has to consider, if you are doing the analysis, what are the things which we want to look for? Things are major consideration, positron energy. Positron energy is important. The endpoint energy and the mean energy. You know, the positron has low energy, it goes up, there is a maximum, and then endpoint energy. So endpoint energy is important, but mean energy. Why is mean energy? Because sharing with neutrino, it's always starting from low energies, a dumbbell-shaped structure, and then going to the end. So one needs endpoint energy and mean energy. Positron emission intensity is important. Is it 100%? Is it 90%? One would like to have 100%. In many cases one has, but sometimes it's only 10%. The non-standard positron emitters have all less. So this consideration is important. And then you have to consider the energies and intensities of the emitted photons. If some gammas are coming, they have to be considered. They have to be considered, especially if they are near 511 K. That is the annihilation peak, which is used in PET, coincidence measurement. If there is a gamma line of 560 near it, or 480, that will disturb. So we have to take into account the background effects. And what are generally the effects? The effects are that the imaging experiences interference. The image may be distorted. The image may have low resolution. The image may be not quantitative. It may lead to faulty quantification. That means a lot of error may be there. The results may be non-reproducible. So it is very important to check each radionuclide developed with different types of tomographs. Some are 2D tomographs, two-dimensional, some are 3D tomographs. Siemens has one, CTI has another one, and General Electric have. Different companies have different tomographs with different algorithms. One has to try a radionuclide on different tomographs. You see here the positron energy plays a role. Intensity, as I said, and intensities of photons. And if you consider all these things, fluorine-18 is the best radionuclide. It has low endpoint energy and low mean energy. It is almost 100% positron emission and there is no gamma. So fluorine-18 is considered to be the ideal isotope of PET, but other radioisotopes are not so. Let's go further and see what is the okay. The important positron range, I said, if it is a low energy, then the positron range is also low. Fluorine-18, if the range can be shown here, you see fluorine-18 has only 0.64 MeV endpoint energy. So you see it is a very small circle here. It is absorbed within just 2 millimeters or so, very small. If we have carbon 11, 0.97 MeV, you see it becomes the absorption, the range becomes bigger. If you have nitrogen 13, 1.19 MeV, the range becomes more. And if you have oxygen 15, the range becomes higher. What does the range becomes higher means? The resolution becomes bad. You have here maybe 2 millimeter and here maybe 4 millimeter or so. So the energy is very, very important. These are the 4 short-lived positron emitters, but still they can all be used very well, all the 4 of them, because the range is relatively small, not so big. Secondly, they do not have gammas. So there is no disturbance from the gammas. But if you now go to the new radionuclides, we compare here the isotope is iodine 124 and fluorine 18. Comparing fluorine 18 and iodine 124. Why fluorine 18? Because that is the best standard. As I said, the lowest energy and no gamma, so fluorine 18 is our gold standard. And if you have the profile of fluorine 18, this is shown in blue. If you have in air, if fluorine 18 is flying in air and the profile is measured, it's a very sharp, narrow peak, and the background is also there in air. If you go to water in the lower part, the resolution is very good still, it's very sharp, but the background becomes a bit higher. You see here, background is lower in the upper part, and here the background is a bit higher. But still, fluorine 18 is the best, whether you put the phantom, it is an air, or whether it is water. If we take iodine 124, what do we have? Iodine 124 has also good resolution because the energy is not very high. So the resolution of iodine 124 is also good. But the background is very high because there are so many gammas. Iodine 124 maybe has 6 or 8 different gammas in addition to the positron. So the disturbance is there. The background becomes very high. In air as well as in water, also background is high. But this can be corrected because the resolution is good, so you can somehow correct it. But anyway, this required some sort of new algorithm. The companies like Siemens or CTI or the General Electric, they were supplying tomographs, and the analysis was based only on the 4 positron emitters, carbon 11, nitrogen 13, oxygen 15, and fluorine 18, because they are all positron emitters and there is no gamma line. But if you are confronted with the radionuclide, which has gammas also, so this correction factor has to be developed. And we had a very good colleague, Professor Herzog, my colleague in medicine, medical physicist, and we supplied iodine 124 and measurements were done. This is a joint paper which is listed here. And one could show that it is there, but it can be corrected. And the companies were so much interested that they asked him to write a new algorithm. You see that there is a constant collaboration between the labs and the laboratories and the suppliers also. If they have the need, they ask some laboratories to do some research, they pay some money for it, and then they get the material done. So this way they could have the algorithm change and the correction could be made. A further difficulty came if you have yttrium-86. It's now a comparison of 3 radionuclides. Fluorine 18 is the ideal, is the best one. Fluorine 18 is the best one. Iodine 124 is not as good as fluorine 18, but it is still good. So it's number 2. Yttrium-86 is the worst. Yttrium-86 is the worst because it has a very high positron energy and it has maybe 20 gammas. It's all full of gamma rays. So it becomes very, very difficult to work with Yttrium-86. And here again, a new algorithm had to be investigated to see this one. Yes, yeah. The reference is here wrong. I have some other reference. Maybe by making these slides, the older reference has come here. This work was done later in 2008. This one, 2002, was with iodine 124. 2008 was with Yttrium-86. Anyway, what do we see? It was done phantom measurements. They are in the PET. One has filled it, one's with Teflon, and one's with the water and with air. So this portion is with air, this is with water, and this is with Teflon. Why is water and why is the air? Air is somehow space in the body, water somehow corresponds to tissue, and the Teflon corresponds to bone. So if the phantom is there, if Teflon phantom is taken, this corresponds to absorption in bone, and if it is in water, it corresponds to tissues, and if it is in air, it is the space in the body which we have. And what does one see? In case of fluorine-18, the images are perfect, whether it is air or water, and there is not much absorption. In Teflon also, scattering, not much, this is scattering, not much scattering because there are no gammas. In case of iodine 124, we have here, iodine 124, the iodine, in case of iodine 124 in air, again, very good. In water, not much difference. But you see, in case of bone, in case of Teflon, there's quite a bit of scattering. So a large correction is needed. Maybe 15% or so the correction comes. But when you come to yttrium, this becomes terrible. In case of air, it is not so critical because things are not scattered. But if you go to tissue or to bone, water or Teflon, then there is so much scattering and so much correction. So in case of water, it's around over 30%, and in case of bone, Teflon, it becomes 70 or 80%. So a lot of correction is needed so that you can get the results in a quantitative form. So it all shows that different aspects are involved. Simply producing an isotope is not enough. You have to be in contact with the user, and the users could be the medical physicists, they could be chemists, or they could be medical doctors. And I think the research and development work is continuously going on. I think these examples show the importance of cooperation. We have physicists, we have nuclear chemists, we have the target development people, we have the chemical separation doing, and we have the Indian quality control methods, and then the medical physicist who is doing, and then the nurses, they assist the doctor, and the doctor interprets the results if it comes to patients. If it is only phantom measurements and other things, then the doctor is not involved, physicists and chemists are working. But if it comes to patients, then it is the medical doctor who is involved, and he or she carries also the responsibility. So a lot of interesting and extensive work is going on with regard to the development of living beings. Let me proceed further, and you see what we have. There are some novel approaches to production of non-standard positron emitters. I told you a small cyclotron is used and solid targets are used, but there is a problem. Medical cyclotrons which are supplied, they have mostly facilities for gases and for liquids. For producing the 4 positron emitters, fluorine-18 is by liquid samples, oxygen is by gas, carbon-11 is by gas. No solid material can be irradiated. So you cannot produce these non-standard isotopes. But one has decided to make solutions of materials and irradiate solutions in the liquid targets. And this way, you can produce the isotope, many of them. Scandium-44, gallium-68, yttrium-86, all these are produced through irradiation of solutions. It could be nitrates or it could be carbonates. They are dissolved and then irradiated. So solution target is one development which is going on. And your teacher, Mrs. Olke, so Mrs. Paulsen, she has done a lot of work on the solution targets in Vancouver, in Canada. So quite expertise available there. They are tricky to make, not so easy. Our solution targets, the major drawback is that the yield is low. You can imagine, if you irradiate a small solid target, 200 milligrams, you can get very high yield of the product. But if this 200 milligrams is dissolved in 5 milliliter of water, or 3 milliliter of water, you irradiate, it is diluted. So your yield in the end may be only 20%. But for local use, it is enough. You cannot use a solution target, make it here in Jülich and send it, let us say, to Munster. So it's a too small activity. So, but if you use in Jülich, it may be enough. So I think the solution targets are made for local use. So it's a big development going on. Next is that you have to go to higher energies, not only 20 MeV, but up to 100 MeV. Then you can have PXN reaction, iron 52, strontium 82 are produced like this. Another one is you can also have alpha particles. Some of the isotopes, copper 61, gallium 68 are produced through alpha particles. Then you can develop some novel generators. You know what are the generators known for positron emitters? You have gallium 68, germanium 68, gallium 68. You have strontium 82, rubidium 82. But there are some others also which can be developed. Titanium 44, scandium 44, iridium 72, arsenic 72. So all the things are going on. You try to make use of the low energy machines through solution target. You want to go to intermediate energy machines. You want to make use of machines which have alpha particles also. Or you want to make generator systems. You also want to make in vivo generator. In vivo means you do not have the material on a column, but you have it in the body. Suppose you inject neodymium 140, that decays and gives you promethesium 140. This is positron emitter. So you inject the therapeutic radionuclide and you measure the positron is formed directly in the body. It is good, but there is a big danger because the product, as chemists, I can tell you sometimes the product is not at the same place where the mother is. The product may displace itself, may have different chemical state. So it is good if it is short-lived, but it's not very sure whether one is using it at the place that it is. Anyway, so many things are being tried and new developments are going on. What is further going on, the so-called exotic routes, heavy ion reactions. You see, heavy ions are mostly used for fundamental work. If you want to produce some radioisotopes, you can do it. But the yield is very, very low because heavy ions are absorbed very easily. In the first few micrometers, 20 micrometers, 30 micrometers, of the foil, the heavy ions will be absorbed. So the isotope formed will be very small amount. The cross section may be high, but the projectile has to go deep into the material to produce a lot of isotope. So this is why protons are best. But heavy ions have been used to produce terbium-52. And this is a special case in the region of rare earths. Rare earths are the 14 metals from lanthanum up to lutetium. There are no positron emitters, or very few positron emitters. And if they are difficult to make. But one of them, the terbium-152, it can be made through heavy ion reaction. So some work has been done. Can you imagine where was it done? It was done in Australia. So different parts of the world are sometimes they excel in some of the things. They are doing maybe some things good which the other cannot do. So in Australia, they developed the heavy ion method to produce terbium-152. The second one is spallation and online mass separation. If you irradiate tantalum with 1000 MeV protons, then maybe through spallation products, maybe 100 isotopes are formed. How can you separate one terbium-152? This has been done in CERN. CERN is the big experiment, the big machine in Geneva. In CERN, tantalum irradiated. If you take out, chemical separation is very difficult. So what does one do? One combines online mass separation, that as soon as the terbium is formed in tantalum, it is heated, taken out, and then through mass separation, you can collect the mass number 152, and you have your isotope, and further purify it, and you can make use of it. It's a very, very difficult process. It's a very, very challenging process. It's a very expensive process. So you cannot do it often. You cannot do it for patients. You can do for research purposes a few times and then maybe make use of it. I tell you the story, this terbium-152 is really very, it's a feat of engineering and experiment, one can say. Tantalum was irradiated with 1000 MeV protons. With online mass separation, it was separated. Then it was transported from Geneva to Switzerland, in Villingen, in Zurich. They did further chemical separation. From there it was flown to East Germany, Bad Berka, and they got it. And there was a patient waiting, and there is a medical doctor. He is very much research-oriented, Professor Baum, and he put it to the patient. And he could show that it's a good isotope. You see, this type of work is pioneering. And really, what is all involved? The big machine running in Geneva, mass separation is running, chemical separation is being done in Zurich, from there being brought to Germany, and there it is being done. Good cooperation, good science, but it's not practicable. You can show it once or twice, but you cannot afford it to put to patients. In the patients, if you want to put it, terbium-152, you have to have some other method. Maybe one can use one of these methods which I have written here. Protons, 120 MeV protons, if you have, then you can make it at a low energy machine. So anyway, I'm telling you the most modern things which are going on, but I also emphasize, don't believe that everything is working so excellent. Some of the things are really on research basis. Maybe it has been done once, but it cannot be done very often. But I think as students, master students, you should know what is going on in this field of radionuclide development. You will not remember everything, you will not absorb everything, but at least qualitatively you should know that low energy machines are used, intermediate energy machines up to 100 MeV are used, and then spallation process is used, even heavy ion machines are used. So these qualitative things you should remember and you should know. So continuous work, development work is going on. But so far it was all about the development of non-standard positron emitters. The other line is now, if you want to do therapy, you have to do development work on therapeutic radionuclides also. Therapeutic radionuclides, therapy radionuclides are mostly produced development work related to therapeutic radionuclides. You know, therapeutic radionuclides are all beta minus emitters, are alpha emitters, are electron emitters, and they are almost all produced in a nuclear reactor. So roughly saying, all the positron emitters are produced at cyclotrons, and all the therapeutic radionuclides are produced in reactors. and the SPECT radionuclides, some in cyclotron and some in reactor. So if we have the reactor radionuclides, we want also to improve them. The development work is going on. What are the aims here? As I said, the aims are either to enhance the yield, the purity, or the specific activity of the known radionuclides. This is one aim. The second aim is to develop some novel therapeutic radionuclides, which have not been used. Novel means which are more suitable. One case is the emphasis is going on to low energy beta minus particle emitters. Previously was phosphorus 32, high energy beta particles, but today the emphasis is on low energy beta particles like rhenium 186. And you want to decrease the internal radiation dosimetry. And the new trend is to have low range, high intensity radiation emitter. Low range means particles which have low energy, but they should be highly ionizing. And highly ionizing, the alpha particles or low energy beta minus particles are X-rays. So one is coming away from beta particles of high energy to beta particles of low energy or alpha particles using an X-ray. If the development work is done, I will try to show you for a few cases what are the changes. I said for the established radionuclides, one wants to have high yield and high purity, high specific activity. I give 4 examples. Samarium 153 is one, then rhenium 188, rhenium 186, and lutetium 177M. So these 4 radionuclides, which are established, they are known very well. The methods of production are known, but the improvement is going on. And what is this improvement? I will tell you now. So start with the samarium 153. Samarium 153 is produced via the N-gamma reaction. I realized it later, this is in German, but I think you can understand it here. It's a very important therapeutic radionuclide, and its importance is increasing. Samarium 153. The reaction is samarium 152, N-gamma gives us samarium 153. And this we have done in nuclear data also in the last semester. We know that this N-gamma reactions, what happens? The cross-section decreases first as a function of velocity of the neutron, 1/v relationship. This is the point at the thermal neutron energy of 0.025 electron volts. And then there are many resonances. One integrates called resonance integral, and then the cross-section coming fast and then going down. So this is the shape of the N-gamma. It has a high cross-section, so the yield is rather high. You can get quite high yields of samarium 153. Just irradiate 50 milligram of the material in the reactor for 1 day, and you have enough radioactivity. The disadvantage is that the specific activity is low. We know in all N-gamma reactions, the specific activity is low. But it is still, since the cross-section is very high, the specific activity is not that low, it is acceptable for many investigations. And in this field, some groups working very much, one is in Missouri, in USA, and the other one is in India, in Trombay Center in Mumbai. These 2 groups are working very much in samarium 153. They produce it, they quantify it and use it in patient studies. It's low specific activity material, but since the specific activity is not very low, it is acceptable. Still, one would like to have some method where the specific activity would be increased. And this specific activity increase, there is hardly any method. One method is the try to produce via the charged particle-induced reactions. So one is often trying, one has tried the charged particles, but it's not very successful. See, one example is the one has tried to produce samarium-153 from neodymium-150. From neodymium-150, if it is taken, highly enriched material, the alpha N reaction gives us samarium-153. And the excitation function is shown here, cross-section, as a function of the alpha particle energy. So if we have alpha particle energy and the cross-section, see the cross-section increases, comes out, reaches a maximum, and then decreases. So alpha N reaction has a cross-section of 60 millibond at the maximum, which is not very high. You can choose the energy region of production from 25 to 15 MeV. You get a yield of 2.2 megabecquerel per microampere hour. This is not very much. So in the end, if you use this alpha N reaction, you can use a normal cyclotron. You can irradiate and produce it. The amount will not be very much. So this is one drawback. The amount will not be very much because cross-section is not very high, and alpha particles, as we have often talked, they have low range, so the isotope formed is not very much. So in the end, if you produce samarium-153 via this route, it will have high specific activity, but it will be very, very expensive. You cannot really afford it. So maybe for some investigations where very high specific activity is needed, some receptor investigations also, one could try to do this. But otherwise, this method of charged particle irradiation is not suitable because it's very, very expensive. So one has to rely on the N-gamma reaction for production of samarium-53. Other two examples, rhenium-188 and rhenium-186. Both of them can be produced through the N-gamma reaction. Just like samarium-153, you can produce rhenium-188 also. You have the rhenium-187, N-gamma, rhenium-188. The same problem, the specific activity is low. And so you have to change it. So how do you change it then? In this case, rhenium, you have to go to a generator system. Tungsten 186, N-gamma gives us tungsten 187, again in gamma tungsten 188, which means in a high flux reactor, you radiate tungsten 186, you get tungsten 188, and this tungsten 188 you put on a column and elute it, and you get rhenium 188. So this has become the method of choice now. If somebody wants to use rhenium 188 for therapy, one takes this generator, tungsten 188 to rhenium 188. The problem is that this generator is very expensive. It's also almost a monopoly of some labs. It's good specific activity you get. The half-life of tungsten is a bit long, so sometimes there may be a problem of the purity of the generator, toxicity of the generator. But anyway, it is being used. But the problem remains its monopoly of a few centers, mostly Oak Ridge National Laboratory, having a high flux reactor, has produced it. Now the Russians are also planning to produce. So it is limited available, but it is available. In Bonn, one of the university clinics, they were using very much rhenium-188, and they were getting the generator from Oak Ridge. And so they were buying it from there, and they could use it. But I think richer countries like Germany can afford to do it, but poorer countries like Thailand or maybe Pakistan or maybe India also, they cannot do it. So they have to rely on their own production through the gamma low specific activity. Other cases, rhenium-186, it's again the same. Here also, rhenium-185 and gamma rhenium-186. So rhenium-186 is a very good radionuclide because it has a low 1.1 MeV. Positron MeV is missing here. Please write it down, 1 MeV. Beta minus 1.1 MeV. But the specific activity is low. So what is doing one here? One tries to use the charged particle reaction. Tungsten 186, PN, rhenium 186. This has been worked out. Functions very well. But the yield is low and the route is rather expensive. There is always constant research and development work is going on. Sometimes you develop a method and you show that it can be done, but it may not be acceptable because it's too expensive. So rhenium-88 can be produced more common through the generator system, but rhenium-86 through the cyclotron production is as yet not developed. One is trying to make better targetry and better separation systems. The fourth example, which I said I give, is the lutetium-177. In case of lutetium-177, it is also a gamma reaction. Lutetium-176 we have. Gamma gives us lutetium-177. There are two isomers, metastable state and ground state. The ground state has a half-life of 6 days. It is very useful, but the metastable has a 160 day, so that is not so useful. That's a bit non-nuisance, so one tries to avoid. But in the gamma production, you are getting both, and one has to find an optimum time which can be used for this purpose. Again, so specific activity is low, so one wants to make use in some other way, and here one chose the reaction ytterbium-176, and gamma gives us ytterbium-177, and this ytterbium-177 decays to lutetium-177. So the decay product of ytterbium-177 is lutetium. In this case, as we know, if it comes down from the mother, the specific activity is good, and the metastable state is also low. See, in gamma, metastable state is higher and specific activity is low. In case of the indirect route, ytterbium-176 and gamma ytterbium-177, beta minus decay, lutetium. It's very good quality, specific activity is good. Also, the purity is low, but the yield is very low. So again, we have the dilemma. The yield is so low that it's not economical. So, see, all these 4 isotopes, which I said, they are used. They are being used in patient studies, but the development is very, very difficult. In each case, it is lutetium-177 and samarium-153, the gamma product is used. The specific activity is low, but since the cross section is high, specific activity low is acceptable. In case of rhenium-86, one is trying to do the PN reaction. It is quite successful, but so far it is experimental stage, and the product they also will be expensive. And rhenium-188, there the generator system is functioning very well. Tungsten-188, rhenium-188. But the problem is that it is rather expensive and it is a monopoly of the laboratory. So these are the 4 commonly used radionuclides where constant development, alternative methods are being tried, and one is trying to develop them. But the major emphasis on therapeutic radionuclides today is shifting over to these few nuclides which are listed here. This is now real research where not much patient studies have not been done. The isotopes are very promising. They could be used, but a lot of development work is going on. Scandium 47, half-life 3.4 day, beta minus energy 610 keV. You see what I said? The emphasis is going to have beta particles of low energy. 610 keV is low. Same with copper 67, 2.6 day half-life, beta energy 577 keV. Rhenium 186 is also considered as a low energy. It's not very high, 1 MeV approximately. Now, terbium 159 is something exotic. It's an alpha emitter. You see, in the region of rare earths, alpha emitter, and has only one alpha gamma ray 3970 keV. And actinium 225 is also alpha emitter, 10-day half-life, and the alpha energy is higher. So terbium 149 and actinium 225 are alpha emitters. The first three, indium 47, copper 67, rhenium 86, they're beta minus emitters. Terbium 149, actinium 225, they are alpha emitters. 1,917M, half-life 13.6 day, it's conversion electron emitter. Again, another thing here. Gamma line is converted and you have low energy conversion electrons, which is very useful. If you can reach the cell nucleus and do Auger therapy, then conversion electron will be useful. And same is platinum 193M and platinum 194M. 4-day half-life, they are Auger electron emitters. So see, the emphasis is on low energy beta emitters, low energy alpha emitters, conversion electron emitters, and Auger electron emitters. All these isotopes are in development. And I will go through one by one to show you the diversity, what type of development work is going on. Let us see scandium 47. Scandium 47, it's a 3.4 day half-life, 610 keV beta, 100% beta, and it has a gamma line of 159 keV, 68%. So this is becoming important. Why is it becoming important? I can emphasize the trivalent metals. All the trivalent metals, scandium, yttrium, rare earths, they make very good chemical compounds which go into tumors. It's a chemical property. They are forming tumor-seeking compounds, and this is why in the last few years, one wants to have metallic radionuclides which are trivalent and add them to make the proper compounds and use them for therapy. Its production methods are summarized here. The first one through the NP reaction. We have often talked about NP reaction in reactor, fission spectrum neutrons. Some amounts have been produced, about 1.6 gigabecquerel. This was done in Brookhaven National Lab in 1998. In recent years, some tendency is coming to use hard gammas, photons. I told you in the last lecture that in the last series, nuclear data, if 40 MeV electrons fall on a heavy target like bismuth, they give you very hard gammas, up to 40 MeV gammas. And these gammas can induce some chemical reactions, gamma P or gamma N, and can be used for production of radionuclides. So this is being used, titanium 48, gamma P gives you scandium 47, 40 MeV electron beam is used, and one has reached a few millicurie, 186 megabecquerel of this has been produced, at the Aragon National Lab. Again in USA, Aragon National Lab. But this type of research is going on in other countries also. The Koreans are trying very much. In Ukraine, it is being tried. In India, some groups are trying. And in USA also, some other groups are trying. They have not reached such a high level as at Aragon National Lab, but they are producing some trace quantities of the material through the gamma P reaction. Another method is to produce in reactor through in gamma. Calcium 46 in gamma gives us calcium 47 beta minus decay. So this can be used, but the main problem is that calcium 46 is very expensive. Just a few milligram, 1 milligram target was used, costing maybe several thousand euro, just 1 milligram of the material. And this way one has tried to show that it can be used in Grenoble, in France, PSI, this is in the Switzerland. So they have used this method. Another method is the P2P reaction on titanium 48. This again was done in Brookhaven National Laboratory. And the third reaction is here, the P2N, and this can also be used, not very much produced, but this was done in Warsaw. You see, things are going on in different parts of the world. Just as you see the importance of scandium 47 in the Brookhaven National Lab, Aragon National Lab in USA, Grenoble in France, which is a European reactor, PSI in Switzerland, Brookhaven National Lab in Warsaw, and many other groups like in Ukraine, in India, in Korea. They're working on it. In Japan also, they are working on it. And also, so we have not worked on this problem because of our main interest has been positron emitters. But now in France also, some in France, there's some groups coming, and in Italy also. So I think the research and development work is going on in different parts of the world because scandium 47 has a very good chemistry. It can be used for therapeutic purposes, which is a very good gamma line, 159 kV, which can be used. SPECT. I give you another isotope of very big importance is copper 67. Copper 67 is similar to scandium 47. Copper 67 similar to scandium 47. Here one has used the neutrons. Reactor production is given here. Again, NP cross-section is used in many cases, but really cross-section is very low, 1 millibarn. Still, it has been able to produce in some laboratories, one by Udin et al., one by Johnson et al. But the product obtained is not very pure. The specific activity is good, but the chemical impurities and nuclear impurities are there. So one is coming away from reactor production and one is concentrated in accelerator production. Same is in scandium 47. The new trend is accelerator production. And in accelerator production here, the 4 reactions are shown: zinc 670 P alpha, zinc 70 D alpha N, zinc 68 P2P, nickel 64 alpha P. These are all reactions, they all need relatively high energy. And this energy is then reflected from the cross sections have been measured, and from there, if one calculates the yield, this is the copper yield, copper 67 yield as a function of energy. You see all the reactions like D alpha N or alpha P or P alpha, they all give relatively low yields. The only reaction which is giving high yield is the P2P. So you have zinc 68 enriched with protons, 80 MeV protons irradiating, and copper 67 is formed. So the use of intermediate energy accelerators is becoming more and more for therapeutic radionuclides. Low energy accelerators for positron emitters and intermediate energy accelerators for therapeutic radionuclides. And one has to fix the energy range that you can get into a product. So copper, scandium-47 and copper-67, they are very much in demand. This thing will come up later also. I will come once again towards the end of the next lecture to show more emphasis on the gamma-induced reactions, and I will discuss again. But today, the charged particle-induced, we see proton, neutron reaction, alpha-induced reactions, and their intermediate energy accelerators are very useful. Let me come to the third beta minus emitter. Third beta minus, we said three of them are getting very important. Scandium-47, copper-67, now rhenium-186. Rhenium-186, again a half-life of 3.7 days, which is the most suited half-life. In therapy, you want to have an isotope of about 3-day half-life. The beta energy is not very high, 1 MeV, and beta is 92%, so very useful. And here, many groups have worked. See, this is the cross-section shown here. Starting from 1996, Shigeta et al. In Japan, Sung et al. Or in China, Mia et al. Or in Korea, I think Tarkani et al. In Hungary, and this is again Hungary, Lapi et al. That is in USA, Minapace et al. In Italy, Kandekar et al. In Japan. And so the different groups have measured this, and the results that are shown here is just overloaded, one can say. And the model calculations have been done by Hussain et al., a group in Lahore. They are working on model calculations. Stupre, as I told you, the last lecture series, 3 programs are very useful, Stupre, Empire, and DALIs. And somehow they all try to show good results in agreement, which means the statistical model can explain the P and cross-section very well. Some of the data points are rather high, but other data points are fitting very well. And this way you have the cross-section well defined at about 90 millibarn is the maximum cross-section. It can be done at a small machine, a small cyclotron. The yield is a bit small, 5 megabecquerel per micron per hour, but it can be made use. And use the tungsten target, irradiate with protons, and try to separate the tungsten 186, the rhenium 186. It has a high activity, high specific activity, and the purity is also very good. So these 3 isotopes at the moment, scandium-47, copper-67, and rhenium-186, are very much under investigation. Not only data are measured, but new target systems are being developed, new chemical separations are being developed, quality control is being developed, and all the three of them emit a gamma line of about 150 keV. So it's also useful, one can do SPECT. With these 3 radionuclides, you can use therapy, but you can also do SPECT because they are suitable for imaging also with the SPECT system. Let me come now to the alpha emitter. Alpha emitter is very important at the moment with the actinium-225. Actinium-225. Actinium-225 has a half-life of about 10 days. And I told you last time, if I remember correctly, that it was separated first time from nuclear waste. In Karlsruhe Transuranium Laboratory, they separated it from waste. It was a big news 20 years ago that from waste, something is being investigated which can be used for medical applications. It is still being used, it is still separated. The method is perfect. One is getting actinium-225, putting on a column, making generator system, and using the alpha emitter. But there is a problem. The reactor, if all the waste should be properly treated, the amount which comes out per year is not more than 2 curie, around about 75 gigabecquerel. It is not enough to meet the demand of the whole world. This alpha emitter, again, it's a trivalent metal, actinium, makes compound, goes into the tumor, and can really be used in targeted therapy. It's the demand is very much coming. And so one is saying, good, we can separate it, but that's not enough. So let us see what could be the production at an accelerator. And two routes have been suggested, Actinium-226, E2N, Actinium-225, and the other one is Thorium-232, EX, Actinium-225. Now the E2N reaction, this was again investigated in Karlsruhe, so Transuranium group has been very active. They separated from the waste and they investigated this reaction also, the E2N reaction. This was investigated, E2N reaction, and one could show that one can produce it. The technology was also developed in München, but it has been taken over by an American company and they are producing larger amounts of it in the USA now. Sometimes it is sad. Things are developed maybe in one country, but there is not so much interest. So the rules was developed in Germany, but now the Americans have taken over. Anyway, it's a benefit for the human being. But I think due credit should be given to the country where something new has been developed. Recent developments are more with the high energy accelerator, protons, and thorium. This is a spallation reaction, and actinium-225 is formed in the spallation process. And there the work is going on, competition between Russians and Americans. Ermolayev et al. In Moscow, and Weidner et al. In Los Alamos. They have investigated these reactions, developing the chemistry, and trying to produce this isotope. The yield from the spallation process is only half as compared to the one from the radium process. But radium process has the disadvantage that it is a radioactive target. It's not easy to make a radioactive target. So radium alpha emitter, if you want to irradiate 100 milligrams or 50 milligrams of radium, it has to be very properly packed, tight, that doesn't come out. Alpha emitter is very dangerous. So very care has to be taken, very strong care. Radioactive target, this is why, but although the technology is developed, P2N, small cyclotron, one is coming away from it and trying to use the spallation process. Thorium-232, spallation actinium-225. And from there, one has this data here. You see the data shows the integral yield of actinium-225, how much is formed. The yield goes up beyond 80 MeV up to about 140 MeV is measured. So the suitable yield is shown here from 140 to about 60 MeV. And this way you can produce actinium-225. So a lot of work is going on, optimization, the data have been measured, the target is also being developed, but chemical separation is difficult, and not only chemical separation, but also in the end, the level of the impurities. One impurity which is very dangerous is the actinium-227. Actinium-227 is very long-lived, and if that would also be there, then it would be a very big disadvantage. The impurity level is shown here. Yeah, this is the impurity level decreasing and going here. At low energies, lot of actinium-227 is formed, but beyond 60 MeV, it is almost constant. So this is why the region chosen here from 140 to 60 MeV. Finish here. Produce actinium starting from 140, but do not come below 60 degrees. In that case, the impurity level will remain more or less constant, not too much acceptable. But still, as I said, a lot of work is necessary to continue further production. The next diagram simply summarizes the production of actinium-225. What I have said, the half-life, 10 days, the alpha energy is there, 100% alpha, and this has the advantage, not only actinium itself, but its daughter, bismuth, is also alpha emitter. So it's both the parent can be used directly and the daughter, bismuth 213. And as far as production is concerned, the three methods which I said, separation from waste, but amount limited to 100 gigabecquerel. This was developed in Karlsruhe. E2N reaction needs radioactive target, technology established, so further optimization is going on. This was developed in Karlsruhe and München, and now it is more done in USA. And the last process is the spallation of thorium, actinium-225, and here cross sections have been measured, chemical separation is being developed, impurities are being checked, and this process is going on in Moscow, in Los Alamos, in Brookhaven, in Nantes, in France also, and a few other places. But all methods of actinium-225 need further production, development, and to produce properly. It's so much in demand. It's very, very much in demand, alpha therapy with actinium-225, that a lot of efforts are needed and more efforts will be carried out. So what I have said from these novel therapeutic radionuclides, I discussed the beta-minus emitters, scandium-47, copper-67, indium-96, and I discussed the alpha emitter, actinium-225. I would say at this point, I stop, give a short break, and we will continue after 12 o'clock, shortly at 12 o'clock with the